I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves. So
Yes, absolutely.
you'll know everybody.
Yeah.
Well,
Excellent.
I guess it is 5:30.
It is 5:30 now. Sit down.
All right.
Awesome.
Everybody. Small crowd. I'll find a seat next to you.
That's it.
Oh, Nick, yes, okay, we did meet.
Introduction.
Right up there.
Yeah. ITGIS.
Not a fail, but
I will. Call this special meeting to order. My name is David Cosmo, I'm chairman of the Waterville District Board of Commissioners. I'm going to have the officials here introduce themselves and the other commissioners. So you know who's present.
I'm Roland LaPointe, I'm the superintendent.
Good evening, I'm John Hamlin.
Good evening, I'm Dick Jagier.
my name's John Jansen, I'm the Assistant Superintendent of the Waterville Sewer District.
And then we have Jim Lord, who's going to be doing a presentation for us from Waterville Engineering. And I guess without further delay, we'll go ahead and let Jim have the floor.
Okay. All right. One arm, yes. Glad to see you all. I came out, again, I'm Jim Lowe with Waterville Engineering, and you'll have to forgive the arm pad, but, you know, we all break sometimes, I guess. But what we want to talk about tonight is the proposed rate study and rate adjustment for the Waterville Sewage District. As we go through a basic presentation, if you guys have questions, please stop us at any moment, ask your questions as they come up. We'll do this as informal as possible and have an open dialogue if we need. Hopefully we can answer all of your questions. So at that, we'll go ahead and get started. To introduce what we've done here is the 2014 sewer rate study was developed to evaluate and refine rates for the sanitary and storm systems to better support today's conditions. There's a 5-year target service period for the rate study. The foundation for the study included the 2009 rate study, annual audits since 2009, and all of the district's expense data in that period as well. Keys to this study being successful are the expenses and proper allocation of those expenses to the sanitary system or the storm system. It was developed through a collaborative effort between Waterville Engineering and the Waterville Sewage District. You guys swear?
No, you're doing good, doing good.
So, just a quick background about the Waterville Sewage District and the milestones that have gone on. The system, the district was established in 1949, and under that, as a legislative act, they have the right to assess rates and fees to support the system and its development, its growth, and its maintenance. In 1971, KSTD was established. Based on the Clean Water Act, the treatment plant was developed, all of the water was collected, sent to the treatment plant for treatment. With that came additional fees, because then all of a sudden you've got to pay to treat the water. In 2005, the storm and sanitary systems became completely separated. Prior to that, it was one system. Over the years prior to that, it was a process of separating them, but originally both systems were developed as one. In 2009 was the last rate study, and that brings us to today.
Because it's kind of traditional to do them every 5 years.
It is. It's a good idea. We recommend systems do them every 3 to 5 years. To do one every year would be exorbitant. The cost of living changes every year. Inflation goes up. Fuel prices change. Everything changes. So it's a good idea to do them every 3 to 5 years. And a system this large, 3 would probably be cumbersome. 5 is a good target period that keeps rates in tune with what they've done. And we'll explain to you how we came to our recommended rates for that projected 5-year period as well.
But I guess that's one thing I've learned from looking at this is you not only have to be able to budget revenues for this year, but for the next 4 years also. You have to project out costs 4 years ahead.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So let's look at some historical rates and where we started. We'll run through this pretty quickly, but in 1976, what you can see is the rate per 100 cubic feet, this first column here. This is your sanitary sewer rate, 70 cents per 100 cubic feet, whereas in 2009 it went up to $2.24, and you can see the steps. And you can see a minimum quarter charge would be $12.60 back in 1976, and today it's $40.32. And you can see the catch basin fees, which is your stormwater related fees, were $83 and now they're $143. Some of the interesting things were if those rates were to follow the consumer price index inflation throughout that period, the minimum quarter would be $52.67 right now. A catch basin fee would be $346, and the annual city fee, which I didn't talk much about, $271,000 right now, would be $638,000. So the Waterville Sewage District has done a good job keeping their expenses and their rates well below inflation. So I point that out. Good job, Roland.
That wasn't me.
So why is a rate increase needed? The district's primary expenses, treatment costs, have gone up 36% in the last 5 years. Projections were 3% per year. They went up 36%. That's a big change. The reason for that is there was some new treatment requirements in place, effluent requirements in place, and the treatment plant went through some major upgrades. So they borrowed a bunch of money to do that, so they increased fees to all of the participating communities to pay for that. Costs of other commodities, building materials, fuels, utilities have also increased, as we alluded to. An increased cost of the district to operate at a deficit for the past several years, and what that means is in 2009, when that rate increase went into play, they projected 3% per year, and they projected some other reasonable increases in other items which have exceeded what that was. So the last few years, they've actually been spending more than they've been bringing in, so it's time to increase those rates and adjust for that.
I just want to take a minute, we haven't talked about it much on the council level, but I just want to make sure that Dana understood that the treatment plant, KSTD facility is separate from the Waterville Sewage District. Yeah, that's the treatment place, and what you guys are is the distribution system that gets the flow to the treatment plant.
Correct, we run the collection system.
So when your flow gets to the treatment plant sends you a bill.
A nice big one.
And that's the bill that is in number one.
This is the bill that's increased 36.
Correct. I got it, it's on this warrant, it's $294,000 for this quarter, it's gonna be $1.2 million for the year.
And we've got quite a bit more detail about that and the other major categories of expenses as we
Just
go
a
further.
lot of people in the city combine,
Correct.
they don't know the two are separate
You make a good
entities.
point.
They combine them both, sewer treatment plant and the sewer system, but in fact, they're two separate utilities.
Yeah. And again, so a rate increase is needed to meet projected expenses moving forward. So the basis of the study, how we developed this study and the information we used to develop the recommended rates. Usage data. We took the most recent quarters of actual data, actual billed usage throughout the entire user base, and we put that into an Excel spreadsheet. We also got all audit information from 2008 through 14. 2008, 2009 is 1 year based off calendar year versus fiscal year. So sometimes you'll hear me say 2009, 2008, but it's the same year. District financial records, all the records used for expenses over that year period was used to calculate and project forward so we can develop what those rates need to be moving forward. And again, projections, there you go. Projections are based off the most recent audit year, 2013, 2014, which ended June 30. So that was the base year. This past year is the base year moving forward. And we compared that to the previous 5 years as well. We trended what those were, what the averages were, and all that information was used to project forward. One of the important things is when we put this all together, we looked at a bunch of different ways of doing increases per year. And we looked at 2.5% per year for all expenses except treatment, and we went 3% per year. The district meets with KSTD on a regular basis. They were looking forward at no major increases or expansions for KSTD at this moment. That could change at any time if regulations change. We can't guarantee it, but at this time we feel comfortable with those moving forward. So the study goals and the criteria. We wanted to develop sewer and storm-related fees that are independent of each other, that support the independent systems. They are separated systems, so the fees for each of them are separate. Determine rate adjustment percent so that it's common to usage charges, unmetered, and roof drains. And what that means is when you get your sewer bill, there's a bunch of different categories, and we wanted whatever the major increase was to the sewer, say per 100 cubic feet, that to be common among those other categories. So it was a pretty common increase or adjustment moving forward. category that doesn't fit in that is the increase to the I&I surcharge. We decided that a 50% increase in that would do two things. It would further entice customers to eliminate those connections, but also not put undue hardship on those people. And what those I&I surcharges are for, there are connections in this system that are perimeter drains, cellar drains, and sump pumps. And what they're doing is they're putting stormwater directly into the sanitary system. That is something that the district and all districts like to eliminate. We want to get rid of that water. As of right now, approximately half of all the water that comes from the Waterville Sewerage District to KSTD is stormwater through inflow and infiltration. So a way to save money is to save that treatment cost by lowering what you're sending to the treatment plant. So this is an incentive to help reduce I&I in the sanitary sewer system. Generate needed storm system revenue from catch basin rates. Lots of different communities develop different rates and fees to pay for the stormwater related aspects. We felt as though that going through the catch basin fee was the simplest, the most straightforward, and the easiest to track from their perspective and also from the owners of those catch basins in the city's perspective. And one of the things that's different in this year's rate study is we've developed two catch basin rates to account for the differences in the efforts the Waterville Sewerage District puts towards those. And the difference is the catch basins that are in the public streets that serve, everybody who drives on those streets, they collect water from the neighborhoods and whatnot. And then catch basins that are on private property, that serve the shopping plazas or anything like that. The district doesn't invest as much money on those privately owned catch basins, however they do pump them out, the water does get into the streets. There is expense there, but it is not as much as those in the streets. So we now have a two-tiered catch basin rate for that reason. Then we jumped into expenses. What are the expenses? There are sanitary expenses and there are storm-related expenses. And here we go. This is where we start to get into a little bit more detail. This is from 2009 to 2014. And these categories on the left, you'll see up top we have sanitary expenses, and here we have storm-related expenses. And these are the exact audit categories that the district's annual audit goes through. And we have gone through these, and you can see each year we've got where those numbers are. And then over here, this is the number that we like to look at the most, is the 5-year average. And you can see the bottom line there for sanitary, the 5-year average was just under $1.5 million. And sanitary was storm was $736,000. That's going to change moving forward because in the history, when this system was developed, sanitary and storm were together. And through this process, those fees have slowly separated. And this will be a rate study where the way we write it up and the way it's explained, they are two totally separate systems. They are paid for separately. So as you can see on the storm, we'll call our attention to this. There's a treatment expense. And this was, I don't want to get into the details of it, but that treatment expense is now moved into sanitary. All treatment moving forward is associated with sanitary sewer. The storm system is now 100% separated. So none of that water gets to KSTD, and that is KSTD's expense. When we see treatment expense on these, that's KSTD. So if we want to jump to the next one, here's where we get into our projections. So moving forward, 2014, 2015, you can see treatment expense 0, 0, 0 on the storm. And it's all up under sanitary. 1.2 million, a little over 1.2 million, and you can see what we're doing moving forward. As you see on the right, what we've done is we took our base year, 2014, and we increased it 2.5%, 3%, 2.5% per year moving forward. And so that number down bottom, the yellow, these are the totals that we see. 2.175 million is the 5-year average of our projected 5-year service period. And the same thing in the yellow for storm. Those are the numbers we are basing our rates off. This is the average 5-year expense, and everything that we have developed for sanitary rates and storm rates are based on those numbers. What's important to call out is these red numbers below it. And we put them below it because these are capital improvements and investments the district will make from their reserve accounts. They have surplus accounts now, reserve accounts, and they are going to draw that number down and invest that money back in the system to help keep rates down and keep their surplus or general reserves at a reasonable level. So those numbers I'm showing you telling you that the district is investing that every year, but it is not affecting your rates.
I have a question on depreciation. How did you calculate the depreciation? Do you have like a dollar number associated with the assets in the system, or how are you separating them between the sewer and the stormwater? Do you have a calculation or 60/40?
There's a lot that goes into that, actually. Roland, do you want to
Yeah,
answer
let me
that?
just try to address that a little bit. When we first inherited the system, okay, it was a combined system. So therefore, there was no differentiation. And the system at that time was under PUC regulation prior to 1975. In those days, the PUC was saying a 70-year straight line depreciation is what you do. Now, last year, I should say the year before, for the first time, our auditor said, I see that 70-year straight line depreciation number. We think you're the only one that we do, and we do a number of these now that's using that. And so most utilities have gone to a 50-year straight line depreciation. That is what we are using. The difficulty that we have is that originally you had a number, okay, associated with all these assets in the ground, being depreciated at a 70-year straight line. So now you're having to draw a line in the sand, and you're trying to say, okay, as time is going by, you do a capital project, now that it's 100% separated, okay, this project is storm. And you capture that for that year, and now you're doing a straight line, 50-year depreciation for that asset. But it's only been relatively very recently, so again, what you have is you took an estimate, and that, so how do you sort between storm and sanitary? Well, originally it was combined. We basically did an estimate, and based on the mileage that we have in the system is approximately 106 miles long, roughly 60 miles in sanitary. Hey man, we use 60/40. So that's pretty much how it is, and it turns out to about $200K, roughly about $212,000 per year. We divvy that up, 60/40, 60 being sanitary, 40 being storm. So that's kind of how we do it.
Now, what is that percentage-wise to the total, like your cost of your assets that you have in the system right now? I know typically you like to see a rule of thumb, 1% of your assets, you like to see a depreciation on that. Is it lower than that, or?
I think the valuation was something like 22 million. And so that's, what is that, 212 to 22 million, it's in there.
Roughly 1%.
It's roughly 1%.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers it.
And they do depreciate. One of the other things is there's common facilities, there's trucks, there's buildings, there's pump stations. The depreciation on those is based off the design life of the actual product in those situations, and as they install new items and purchase new things, it's based off the expected service life of those items. And if a piece of equipment services both, then they break up the depreciation of that based on that 60/40 percentage of pipe in the ground, essentially, which is how things work. So,
Nothing's perfect.
all in all, and we beat that up. That was one of the things we beat up pretty hard. The two things we really looked at hard during the study was depreciation and allocation of expenses. Is it sanitary? Is it storm? Is it sanitary? Is it storm? How do we get to those numbers? How do we justify? How do we know where you're spending your money and where we need those rates? So storm revenue, again, storm drain rates were calculated to meet projected 5 years, and it all came from catch basins, essentially. There is a little bit extra, and I'll show you that, but it's pretty insignificant. Sanitary revenue, rates were calculated and balanced to meet the 5-year projections, and again, our goal is fiscal responsibility, and the revenue that comes in is what the district needs to continue to run effectively. So let's jump right into what the revenue is and how we started collecting the revenue. We'll start with storm system first. Here's what we have for catch basin revenue needs. The projected 5-year average expense is going to be $500,000, essentially, $501,000. So that's what we need to generate moving forward. So in this table, what you see is you've got 3 2004 basins. The district had an estimated number of basins, 2,149. They had 1 stormwater fee. Didn't matter if that catch basin was in private property or it was in public property. And they also had a fee that they charged the city, $271,000 that was associated with dealing with, maintaining that system and whatnot. So during this year, the other thing that happened is the district has a GIS system now, and they've gone out and actually counted and located every basin in the system. They spent a lot of time and money doing that, and so they now have an accurate number, 2,200 basins. So then what we looked at is we broke these rates down. You can see based on the current rate what these numbers are, is based on the proposed rate. Right now, that whole revenue projection will be $584,000. That's above what's needed. So actually, on the stormwater side of things, people that own private catch basins for the city are actually seeing a reduction in their fees moving forward. They're not seeing an increase, they're seeing a reduction of approximately $80,000 overall. The city's savings is about $70,000, if I remember that correctly.
Correct. So 350 over 5 years, it all works out.
One of the things that we tried to target was, we tried to target, the city's overall cost adjustment is about 13.3%. That's what you're going to save per year. Catch basins outside the public right-of-way, just under 14%. So the private owners are seeing about the same savings as the city's seeing. And that was one of the things that we were hoping to do in fairness, is to split those savings appropriately. So that's your stormwater in a nutshell. We'll talk about it a little bit more. Basically, when we determined based off those allocations that we talked about before, and what was really storm and what was really sanitary, we determined that $501,000 is the average 5-year projection moving forward. And how do we generate that every year? And this is how we've done it. And we'll talk about what the specific rates are moving forward later on in the presentation. So then the revenue on sanitary, there's lots more categories in the sanitary side of things than the storm. You're talking about user charges based off metered water usage. Basically, the district gets the metered usage from the Kennebec Water District, and we use that to assign what that water is that's going into the sanitary system. You're using the water, it's going into your sewer as well, and that's how we calculate what the rates are for sanitary. The I&I surcharge we talked about. Roof drains, there's a number of roof drains, there's approximately 81 of them in the system, and we've got some numbers on that later on. Unmetered customers, those are people who might have a well, but are connected to the sewer, so we don't have a metered usage for them, so they're a flat rate customer. Oakland is now connected to the system, they have a separate agreement, we're not going to talk about Oakland much, but that did factor in to our calculations and what revenue was needed and how we generated those rates. And then other income. There's other income that's collected throughout the years. There's permits, there's people that, build new houses or new connections, there's inspection fees, there's other fees. So there's a bunch of other things that go into that, which we'll show you that as well. So when we get to the usage base actually calculates about 78%, generates about 78% of the revenue in the sanitary side. It comes from your standard users. Whether that's commercial users, whether it's residential users, the actual sanitary usage is about 78% of it. That says that down there. So we use, like I said, the last 4 quarters, we put it all into one Excel spreadsheet, we put a bunch of math formulas in there, and we put everything together, and we work simultaneously through these fees to figure out the appropriate fees. So here we go into the system search, and I won't necessarily, we didn't include an Excel spreadsheet or a projection of that on the sanitary. It was a very long, very large, cumbersome file. To try to present that would probably be just as cumbersome, so we're going to skip that data. We'll jump right into the system surcharges. What the system does is when the I&I surcharge was enacted, they basically said, we're going to put a fee out to everybody in the system. And that is to have, you've all got sump pumps, cellar drains, perimeter drains tied into the system. You call us, we'll come out and inspect your home and prove you don't have any connections, at which point we waive that fee. So out of the 4,881 current connections, 3,300 of them have been inspected and waived. They do not have any connection. 432 of them were proven to have a connection to that system through a sump pump, a cellar drain, or a perimeter drain. Leaving 1,100 of them, 1,135 of them still yet to be inspected. So right now that 432 and that 1,135 are getting that fee. So we know what that is right now. So moving forward, we had to figure out, okay, over the next 5 years, how many of those systems are going to be inspected and waived? And knowing that when you get to something like this, at the end of, an inspection, the people that aren't calling you back either don't want you in their home, they know they have a connection, they're not gonna bother calling you. So as of right now, what was waived and what's been inspected, 11.53% have a connection that brings I&I into the sanitary system. We expect that number and these remaining ones will go higher. We estimated 20%. That gave us 976 totals at the end of the 5-year study period. We averaged that back, and we came up with an average right here in 2019 proposed based on the current rate of $152,000 per year would be generated based on those averages. So even with that, we looked at what was realistic, what's the expected, waived versus not waived, and what's our revenue going to be from this system with the proposed rates.
Question, I think it goes back to the 2009 rate study as well. How is that $20, and I guess the proposed $30 surcharge calculated?
Well, it's a great question. We tried to learn from, Winslow went into this business before we did, and what they did, they proposed like a $50 per quarter. There was a lot of blowback politically, $50, oh my God, are you serious? And what they ended up doing was they left that in place for sump pumps, took it away from perimeter drains, which is really the guts of what you're trying to go after. What we did, we had made a calculation originally that we were going to have about 40% at the end of the day. It's turning out that that's not going to be the case. So we had hoped for 20%. I'll be honest with you, we pulled that $20 a little bit out of the air, and the reason we wanted it to be a source, but we didn't want it to be onerous, because after all, we're applying it across the board, and a lot of guys don't have it. So we didn't want to overly burden it, but what we did want to do was get enough people to call us to get that inspection so we could start narrowing the field. And it actually worked out really well. We postponed the implementation of it by 6 months so that we'd have an opportunity to say, look, this fee is going to come into effect. You got 6 months. Give us a call. If you don't have that, we'll send our team out there, we'll inspect, we'll give you the waiver, you'll never pay it. And it actually turned out to be a pretty manageable number. We started late in the fall, taking advantage of that, early fall, winter, and we always send two people. I can't have one guy alone in somebody's house. It's just the way it is. So I send 2 guys, they go together. We initially did it, of course, we ended up, the first year, we did a couple thousand. We got a lot of phone calls. Nobody wants to pay that $20. So we sent out, we had like 2 teams of 2, and they would go out, we dedicated the first week in every month. And we basically blew through a whole bunch of inspections. Then it started to peter off. You have absentee landlords, you have the folks growing the marijuana in the basement, whatever, they don't want you in there. So now we have a much better handle on where perimeter drains probably are. So now, and obviously the total revenue, including the roof drains, including the perimeter drains, we might see a couple $100,000. We're talking about a treatment cost of $1.2 million. So we don't feel it's really too burdensome, but yet we're trying to spread that charge to where the cost is coming from as fairly as we can. So now, okay, we're bumping it up 30. I expect that's going to generate some more phone calls. That's what we want. Then eventually we'll get that 11%. We'll find out who really has the perimeter drains. And then after that, God help those people, will probably go up substantially after that as well. So
I guess my question is, have you done the calculation to see what the actual cost for the district is? Between the...
Well, the problem is you can't measure it.
Well, you probably do the dry weather flow and then figure out with the wet weather flow of the plant, and then figure out, certain percentage is going to be leakage from the catch basins, and then you can figure out.
It would be a pretty inexact science. You got the main lines.
Well, more exact than the $20 surcharge.
Maybe.
One of the ways that we looked at it was, we know about 50% of the flow that gets to the treatment plant is I&I. We can reduce that by taking the roof drains out, because we can calculate exactly what's getting in there. We know how much rainfall the state of Maine gets every year. We know the square footage of the roof drains. There's other components that we can calculate. We can back calculate that out. Right now, it's about $1.2 million to the treatment, and it's about $200,000 that's coming out of this I&I charge. There's other ways that I&I gets in there, though. From an engineering perspective, we estimate typically that when you talk in I&I, about half of it comes from the public streets, the sewer mains and the manholes, and about half of it comes from the private side, the private service lines, which are usually put in with the same quality of care and material as the main is. They're older, so some pumps and cellar drains. So when we look through those numbers, we really felt that this was a fair number. When we looked at where we were at, what we were generating, what everybody's share should be if everybody paid, if we could assign that, you really can't. And again, it's a number that is intended to get people to do this without being overly burdensome, overly cumbersome.
And I guess what leading to my next point is that you have basically 3,000 people that have been waived on that particular surcharge. It just seems to me that the increase to $30 was basically to balance out the revenue that you planned on and were intending to get, but now you're increasing the rates so that you can get that revenue stream, at least in this particular block.
Well, we would have had to get the revenue either way. The revenue is what it needs to be. When we look at what we know the expenses are to run this system and pay the treatment plant, that number is, $2 million a year. It's going to come from somewhere, whether it comes from the sewer ratepayer or we break this fee out, knowing that stormwater is getting in there. If you own a system that has a storm connection to the sanitary system, you should be paying a little bit more than the person who doesn't.
I agree.
So that's why it's important to do that in our, with the information we have, without spending, we could find out a lot more information, but at what level does the district invest money to find out what that number is? At some point we say, okay, with the information we have, we feel like this is a fair number, and that we've done our due diligence to calculate what that is.
But the increase in the $20 fee up to 30 is a 50%.
That is correct.
Increase, whereas the rates, the sewer use rates, are increasing by what percent?
13.84. It is more. It absolutely is. It is.
Yeah.
And part of that is
More than one of them.
and part of that is to put an incentive in there to get these disconnected. The ultimate goal is to get these disconnected, and in order to do that, we need to know where they're at, and we need to give people incentives enough to make that worthwhile.
I guess my whole point is that you have this, you're going up 50% on this surcharge, which people aren't happy about anyway. You add to the fact that the city is now charging per bag for the trash, and you've got some animosity amongst the citizens that I can imagine that or foresee that some people are going to be pretty upset that the rates are going to go up to $30.
There's no question that, when you think about it this way, that minimum quarterly charge, whatever it's going to be, it was $40.32. It's going to go up a smidgen. I mean, so that $30 a quarter, I mean, those perimeter drains could easily be inserting more flow than that 1,800 cubic feet that we're charging. So we really don't feel it's unreasonable from that perspective. But you make a fair point. I mean, we're just trying to strike that balance between what's fair and reasonable.
Okay, so let's get into roof drains real quick. That's the next item up for bid. As you can see, I've only got a few here. There are a total of 81. I have hidden some of them because basically we don't need to see all the data. The goal here of this spreadsheet was simply to show you our process and what we've got. We've got the square footage of every roof drain or every roof that's connected to a roof drain. We calculate what the runoff is from that, and we look at what its projection would be under the current rates or what it would be under the proposed rates. And you can see right now you're generating about $52,000 a year. Those roof drains are going to go up to about $57,000 a year in revenue generated. One of the things that's important to note, this year we got 49.96 inches of rain in Waterville. Main average for Waterville is 48 inches. So when we looked at our projections moving forward, we actually calculated it back to what it would be at 48 inches, not the 49.96 that we got this past year. So we did look at rainfall. It was also looked at the same thing when we calculated Oakland's revenue. We looked at the rainfall change there as well because they have I&I. So we did look at what it would be on an average year, not what happened last year. Zero read accounts, these are the ones I was indicating. Actually, these are accounts that are not active. Water is turned off. These are actual accounts that are connected, but water is turned off. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So this is a pretty small amount, but these went up the same percentage. Okay. Other income. This is one of the other categories I talked to you about before, other income. As you can see over here in the 5-year averages, we have sanitary and we have storm. The other income for stormwater is pretty insignificant, it's about $50 to $100. For sanitary, it's $110,000, so there is some significance there. And that comes from sewer permits, tax adjustments, rate of return, inspection fees, and a number of other things that go along with the operation of the system.
The Oakland income is not there, the Oakland revenue?
That is correct. When Oakland tied in this number right here, this $5,000, that number was significantly
They did
higher.
a connection fee of,
No, I'm talking about the amount they pay.
well,
That's separate.
Right,
That's separate. You'll see that.
You'll see, yeah, it's factored in, trust me.
Yes, well, there was a large connection, when Oakland connected, they got a large connection fee. There was a readiness to serve fee, there's an impact fee, there's fees that go along with connecting to the system. We took that out of this calculation so that we wouldn't be using it in our projections moving forward. We basically tempered it back to what an average year would be for our projections. Here's Oakland's revenue right here, okay? So this past year, the revenue from Oakland was $157,000. Some of that is I&I, they do get a considerable amount of I&I, and you can see next year, we're actually projecting it to be down $22,000. Part of the reason was the 2 inches extra rain. The other thing is, the Waterville Sewerage District worked with Oakland on a regular basis. We know that they are currently in the process of doing a number of upgrades to reduce I&I. They're doing other things that are going on. So we did not want to overinflate the revenue that we projected from Oakland. So we tempered that back to a level we felt was more realistic. And then we moved them up to 3% per year, just to calculate forward. And did a 5-year average, and that 5-year average is again the number we used in our calculations. So revenue versus expenses. So let's look at what those revenues are and what the projected expenses are that we've talked about. So here's your expenses over here on the right. These are the 5-year averages that we showed you before. $2.175 million and the $501,000 for storm drain. And you can see the current revenue versus the projected revenue under the new rates. So let's look at this right here. Under the sanitary, we're projecting to make just over our projected expenses, and the same thing with sanitary, $506,000 versus $501,000. It's a little over. To try to get that number to be dead nuts is nearly impossible. There's rounding things, there's all kinds of other things. So we felt as though that we had hit that target as reasonably as possible. And you can see all of the revenues that were calculated. You can see the user charges, Oakland's charge, unmetered customers, zero read accounts, roof drains, I&I surcharge, and other revenue. So all of the categories of revenue is factored into these calculations. So based on all of that, and everything that we've showed you, what the recommended rates are that help us get to those numbers and those projections are going to a usage charge of $2.55 per 100 cubic feet. The charge was $45.90 per quarter. Charge, yeah, okay. Charge $56.92 per quarter for unmetered customers. We're going to charge $5.10 per 100 cubic feet for roof drain connections. Retain ready to serve / impact fee of $480 per EUR. That is existing, that hasn't changed, it's the same as it was. Charge $30 per quarter for I&I surcharge. Storm drain fees, charge $123 per catch basin outside the right-of-way and $247 for catch basin in the right-of-way. That's what we were talking about before. The difference in the actual expense and the effort that the district puts forward in those basins is what makes that difference. And then the other rates and fees, they've retained their permit fees to be the standard. Those are not going up at all. Those will be the same. $250 per feet.
That's for new construction?
New construction.
Why wouldn't you raise that? When you have Colby and Thomas and all of these people who are building so much.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you raise the permit?
We didn't see a need to do that, and that would be kind of anti-growth, to be very honest. We're trying to stimulate growth. We have that Trafton Road development out there, and my gosh, you know, they showed up with a example. You know, Oakland when they connected, we're estimating 300,000 gallons a day, and $2 a gallon, that's a $600,000 connection fee. It's a lot of money. Elm Street Apartments, I mean, we were talking like $15,000 just to connect. So it's a pretty substantial fee, and what you don't want is, you don't want to discourage growth. You know, Lord knows we need as much of that as we can. So it's a tough, you know, it's a tough one.
But that's not the only connection fee, the $250.
Right,
Yeah, the 250 is just the permit inspection. You know, we have the 480 per ERU, the $2 per gallon a day.
And that really does, that 250 permit fee really does cover the district's cost.
Yeah, I mean, that's just my man going out there with a saddle and actually hooking it up. You know, we're not trying to get rich on that, you know, you could increase it, but, yeah.
Do you have an example of like what a business, just so that we can get a comparison, how much a connection fee would be for, you know, just an average business, if you have a recent one that you can think of that might be?
You know, the businesses, well, I mean, a house is $480, okay? So if you got a house, an apartment, $375. You know, they tend not to rent. Where the money comes in, if you've got, example, a dormitory, Thomas College, you know, 300 residents. You know, now you're getting into $15,000, $20,000 connection fee. So it ramps up pretty fast.
I think that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty good.
And it's based on their projected water usage.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that Dana knew.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I'm glad you raised it.
Yeah.
Okay, so, let's talk about what the changes are gonna be to some of your major customers. So, we'll start right out with the city's costs up top. It's storm rate related, this isn't sanitary related to the city. So as of right now, the city pays $540,000 between catch basin fees and the city fee. The new fee will be $468,000 based on the proposed catch basin rates and the number of catch basins the city owns, either in public or private situation. 13.3% savings. Everybody else goes up is 13.84. That number's consistent for sanitary all the way. And we put these numbers on here just so you can see what some of your larger customers, how they're going to be impacted, as well as some of your normal customers. Colby is going from $136,000 to $55,000, excuse me, so approximately $19,000 increase. Thayer Hospital, you can see those numbers up there in what they do. 13.84%, I'll tell you, is a very reasonable increase. And we've got some more information to show you later on if anybody has any questions. But let's talk about what it does to a typical customer who uses 8,000 cubic feet per year. They would pay $179 today, they're going to pay $204 tomorrow. It's not a huge increase. It doesn't really hurt someone's budget a whole lot. It's reasonable. It gets the cost done, and we feel responsible. Minimum customer charge, somebody who uses the minimum every month, is going from $161 to $183. So basically $20 to $25 increase per year is what most customers can expect on the residential sewer services. So then what we look at is where do we compare statewide? So what we have here is Maine Rural Water Association does a sewer rate survey every couple of years, and they did one in 2013. And what this list shows is that the lowest similar system with comparable rates, Fort Fairfield is the lowest in the state. Back in 2010 was their last rate increase, and they have $60 annual average residential charge, which is phenomenal. Town of Benton, who's number 2, but they also get subsidized, I believe.
Yeah, and I'm quite sure Fort Fairfield, a little tax money in there that we don't quite see, so, you know.
Waterville Sewage District, after the proposed increase, will be number 5 on the list, 5th lowest in the state, even after the proposed increase of $204. The town of Fairfield is 24 at $330, and you can see these other numbers. We didn't put everybody on here. We put a few representative communities of similar size, similar operation down here for comparative purposes. We'll show you Castine is not a place you want to own a sewer connection.
I saw this in the mailer, and I guess my question is, why is Waterville Sewage District in comparable size to, say, Brunswick Sewer District and Greater Augusta Utility District? why is it basically half the cost?
I can tell you that.
That's a great question, and he'll love to answer
Yeah,
that.
we have no debt. We have no bonds. We have, most of these that have high rates, there's a huge item in there for debt service, and we don't have it. You know, we're living on, you know, we're using the pay-as-you-go program. And guys, that's the way to do it, if you can do it. I mean, that's the secret. No debt's the godfather of cheap rates.
A lot of these communities in Maine, in the whole Northeast essentially, started out as combined systems, water, sewer and storm in one system. And then when the Clean Water Act came in, and they had to build treatment plants, and they had to get rid of all their outfalls, had to borrow a considerable amount of money to go through that process, and are still going through that. And they had no money in their reserve accounts to be able to pay for that as they went. So they did these great big projects, had these huge debt services, which is what you're seeing in a lot of these rates over here. So that's the biggest piece of it.
Now, do they, like, so for instance, the Brunswick Sewer District, do they have a similar storm charge where they charge the city of Brunswick, I'm thinking of Waterville, we have a $150,000 storm surcharge or storm treatment fee, I guess, or something similar. Is there something comparable that the Brunswick Sewer District is doing as well to basically?
I can't talk to Brunswick. I know that, you know, as an example, in Augusta, you know, and they've got quite a lot of debt there. They're charging $550 a catch basin. If your house is on a street that is served by a storm line, you're paying an ERU, you know, per impervious service on top of everything else. Then you have the communities that are MS4 communities. That's a whole other league. And some of these, you know, the ones that have the MS4s, that have all these additional regulatory requirements, stormwater management plan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, luckily we're not there yet. But I'm going to tell you, it's a matter of time. You know, we're going to be numbering our outfalls. We're going to be into the stormwater management plan arena. You're going to have a bunch of costs. And
I'll tell you, every community does it different. Everyone does it slightly different. Whether the minimum charge is based off 1,800 cubic feet per quarter or 2,000 cubic feet per quarter, there's slight variations everywhere you go. How people address catch basins in Augusta, how they deal with people that live along it. Some places don't charge the city, and again, Waterville Sewerage District is going from where they had one fee to the city as well as the catch basins, and is now going to strictly catch basins. We're going to simplify that, and it, you know, it just makes it clear to everybody. It makes it more transparent. People who have private catch basins can buy into this. The city can buy into it. The residents who live on those streets, or the people that own businesses on those streets can buy into that. It's clear, it's easy to follow, it's good logic. So even though other communities do it differently, we really felt as though collectively we laid forward a very straightforward, very transparent process so that everybody can see where the money is generated, where it's going to, and that it's fair.
It seems like you know, the city's storm treatment fee goes down by 13%, and then everyone else's, including the residents, go up by 13%.
Okay, let me answer that. Let me answer that. The 2009 rate study, as well as this rate study, are based on projections. And if those projections are wrong, then you readjust. You see that. And the reality is the projections of what was spent on stormwater in the 2009 study isn't actually what happened for one reason or the other, whether it's rainfall, whether it's there were other requirements. The DEP and the EPA come up with new requirements, which made the district focus on the sanitary side of things more. They spent a considerable amount of money and time relining sewer mains over the last number of years. So even though we're projecting this to happen, reality can change that sometimes. So what this is an adjustment in those allocations and those projections, which is why you see stormwater going down and you see sanitary going up.
It really boils down to Mark Turner's fault. It's all his fault. I'll tell you why. I have that job, so I can tell you. Look, I have no crystal ball. I try to lay out a capital improvement plan, whatever the hell have you. At the end of the day, when Mark tells me, I'm doing Silver Street this year, I'm doing this street, I'm doing that street, I send my TV camera out there, because when Mark's done, he doesn't want me digging up that street. So I'm basically following Mark's lead. I put that camera down there, And what I find, I gotta fix it. And if that turns out to be sanitary, that's what gets fixed. And that's, so, you know, I'm a little bit of a slave to Mark in that agreement. So these things don't always pan out.
The other thing
There's no correlation between the 13 up, 13 down. That's really solely driven on that 36% increase in treatment costs. It's just a fluke that they happen to look that close.
Right.
There's nothing going into it saying.
It's true.
It's really the way the numbers just came up.
One of the
We
other
didn't even know
things,
until the end where it was going to be. So.
one of the other things, in the 2009 rate study, which was enacted in 2009, it was done in 2008, the system became finally separated in 2005. So when they did that rate study, the data they had was about this much of what we had today to develop our projections. So they were making bigger guesses with less data off a separated system than we have today. So our hope is that every year this is done, that the district gets better at projecting where those costs are going to be and zeroing in on what the actual is.
When I see this, I just feel like there's, we're not spending the money on assets in the system. It just looks like, you know, are we following an asset management program to fix items in, every year? You must have a plan where you're basically allocating money to these number of streets and then basically.
We budget it, but again, there's budget, there's execution. You know, there's plan, there's reality. You know, when I sat in Mark's chair, I planned my butt off. City council told me how much money I was gonna have to pay for those roads. God bless America.
Which one, I'm sorry?
Go back to the expenses spreadsheet. Right there. This depreciation that we've talked about, they don't put that money into an account, they put that money into the system every year. They say, the way they depreciate, the way the Waterville Sewage District does it, say they calculate what that depreciation is, and that number gets reinvested in that system every year.
And actually, the whole capital plan is depreciation plus the capital improvement.
Right, so
And
you've
we
got
just
the
have a big
depreciation.
year coming up with expenditures, and then each year, if you add those together, we just decided we're gonna fund about 500 grand over the next 5 years out of our sinking fund, and that's out of the delta that's above what we receive back in depreciation. Depreciation never covers all the capital costs.
So I hope that answers your question a little bit. They do have a capital improvements plan, they do have a strategic maintenance plan, and they have a method of investing that.
I'm just trying to find where it's subsidized. I feel like the residential rates are being subsidized elsewhere with different allocations. I don't know.
You know,
Maybe I need to look at the.
When you look back in history, there's kind of a secret here. You know, most of these districts were born in the 70s when the Clean Water Act came into bite, and all these communities said, oh my God, we're gonna have to bond, and we can't do it, let's make a district. Our district was founded in 1949, and during the 70s, my predecessor, the city did some amazing things with community block development grants, and there was a lot of federal money that ended up getting plowed into that infrastructure, and a lot of it was used for separation. So by the time the 70s rolled around, our separation was already in full swing, and I think a lot of federal dollars were used in lieu of, you know, the district having a bond. So I think we got a real big leg up on a lot of surrounding communities, which, that was great.
I guess one thing I became convinced of in looking at the way the study was done was that there was very, very careful differentiation between the storm costs and the sanitary costs.
Correct.
And so, I mean, each week, each month, they knew how much of their time and expense was sanitary and how much was storm.
Correct.
And so that was something that we didn't have that good a feeling about before, and now we know. So, you know, of course, we're happy on the city side that our bill is going down $77,000, but I think it's a direct reflection of what you actually spend money on. So much is on the sanitary, so much is on the storm. We know we have responsibility for the storm. We'll pay our storm bill as long as we can see what it's for. And now we can see what it's for much better than before. Much, much better than before. Yeah, much better.
Thank you for that. So let's go back down to the end where we were. I think we were just about at the end, weren't we?
We were.
Next one. And next one. Yeah, I thought we were at the end.
So
that's our presentation in a nutshell, and I hope that we've given you the information. There's obviously a lot more that went in behind the scenes, and all those spreadsheets are multi-pages long and everything's tied together, but it's all very clear and it follows a line, and we basically tried to give you a summary of what we did and how we came to those numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm here pulling the audience.
You
You know who I am, so
Yeah. They know who we all are.
I want to thank everyone that's attended. I guess we've answered all the questions that people had, and so without further ado, we'll...
I wouldn't have accepted the $30 fee rolling if David.
My question to you, Mike, you want to defer the city's to raise the...
Well, just for the
Well, just for the general information, this is on the agenda for tomorrow morning. I'm anticipating action on this rate structure tomorrow morning, because Mike, you're always welcome to come. But unless, and I will add,
We sent out the yellow.
we sent out the yellow notices, and I thought that was very helpful. All the ratepayers got that, they knew about the meeting tonight, they had their opportunity. I did receive two written pieces of correspondence, amazingly, both of them in support of this rate structure.
I got one.
And you got one of them. You know, none opposed. I think that's astounding. So there you have it.
I don't have to pay the surcharge, so. Looking out for my sister, though.